The Legacy of Time, Chronicles of the Kismet, Time's Reckoning. Jade sat in the living room by the fireplace, the warm glow of the flames flickering across his face. The house was quiet now, a rare moment of stillness after everything his family had been through. He leaned back in his chair, his thoughts drifting to the past, to a day that had changed everything, the day Cody was born. It had been one of the happiest days of his life, the moment he first held his son in his arms. But it was also the day Jade made a decision that weighed heavily on him still. That was the day he had told Claire about the years he had disappeared, years she didn't remember because, in this timeline, they never happened. Only he and Valerie knew the truth about what had once been. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him, pulling him back to that time. Cody's birth had been a whirlwind of emotion. Claire was radiant, exhausted, but glowing as she cradled their newborn son. Jade stood by her side, overwhelmed with love for both of them. He had waited for this moment, but the secret he had kept for so long gnawed at him. The secret of his disappearance, of the years that had been erased from time. Claire smiled up at him, her green eyes soft with happiness. "Isn't he perfect?" Jade nodded, but there was a weight in his chest. He had to tell her. She needed to know the truth, even if it sounded impossible. He had promised himself that when Cody was born, he would come clean about everything. "Claire," he said softly, sitting beside her on the hospital bed, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Her smile faded as she saw the seriousness in his eyes. "What is it?" Jade took a deep breath. "Years ago, before Valerie was even a teenager, I disappeared. For a long time. But you don't remember it because it never happened in this timeline." Claire frowned in confusion, but she stayed quiet, listening. "I opened a portal," he continued. "It was an experiment, something I'd been working on for years. But when I opened it, something went wrong. A being, I don't even know what it was, pulled me through. I ended up in the future, trapped there, while time sentinels forced me to fix a disturbance in the timeline." Jade paused, searching her face for understanding. Claire's expression was unreadable, but she didn't interrupt. "While I was stuck there, time moved on here. Valerie was just a toddler when it happened. But when she grew up, she found my old work, figured out how to open the portal again, and came to rescue me. She was the one who brought me back home." Claire's hand tightened around his. "Jade. There's more," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The time sentinels chased us. They gave us one cycle to fix the timeline. Valerie and I went back to the moment it all started, to the day I opened the portal. We had to stop me, my younger self, from opening it." Claire's eyes widened, her grip on his hand tightening even more. "We did it," Jade said, his voice quiet. "We stopped the portal from opening. And when we returned to the present, the timeline had changed. No one remembered that I had disappeared. To you, to everyone, I had never left. It was as if it never happened. But Valerie and I, we remember." There was a long silence as Claire processed what he had said. Jade could see the struggle in her eyes, the disbelief warring with the trust she had in him. "So you've been carrying this all this time?" she whispered. Jade nodded, his throat tight. "I didn't know how to tell you. And when I realized that only Valerie and I remembered, I thought maybe it was better if no one knew. But I couldn't keep it from you forever. Especially now, with Cody here." Claire looked down at their son, her expression softening. "I can't pretend to understand all of this, but I trust you. If you say this happened, then I believe you." Relief washed over Jade, and he pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you. But," Claire added, her voice firm, "no more secrets, Jade. We're a family. Whatever happens, we face it together." Jade nodded, holding her close. "I promise." The memory faded as Jade blinked, the firelight flickering in his eyes. It had been years since that conversation, but the weight of it still lingered. Claire had kept her word, standing by his side through everything. And now, with Cody back after being lost in a parallel universe for 5 years, their family was once again united, but for how long? Jade stood up, walking over to the window. Outside, the night was calm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that more storms were coming. The hooded man was still out there, in their world and in the parallel one. And this time, they had to finish it, for good. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Valerie standing in the doorway. "Dad, you okay?" Jade gave her a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Valerie nodded, walking over to stand beside him. "I've been thinking too. About everything. About how we've always found a way to fight back, no matter what. We'll find a way to stop the hooded man. I know we will." Jade placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know. We have to." Valerie looked up at him, her expression fierce. "And this time, we're not letting him take anything else from us." Jade nodded, his resolve hardening. "No, we're not." Together, they stood in silence, staring out into the night, ready for whatever came next. Jade and Valerie stood side by side, staring out the window, their thoughts swirling with the weight of what lay ahead. The room was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. The threat of the hooded man still loomed large, and they both knew the battle was far from over. Behind them, they heard footsteps. Cody and Mallory entered the room, their faces serious. Cody walked up to his father, his expression one of determination. "Dad," Cody said, his voice steady, "we need to talk." Jade turned to face him, sensing the urgency in his son's words. "Okay, son," he replied, curious about what was on Cody's mind. Cody didn't waste time. "Before we can even think about going up against the hooded man, you need training." Jade raised an eyebrow. "Training?" Cody nodded firmly. "Yeah. You've got all these Kismet powers, but you don't know anything about them. And if we're going to have any chance of stopping the hooded man, you need to learn how to use them properly." Jade tilted his head slightly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "All right. So, what do you suggest?" Cody's expression remained serious. "I can help with some of it. The other Jade, the one from the parallel universe, showed me a lot. He trained me, taught me about his powers. I've been through a lot of the same training you'll need." Mallory, standing a few feet away, spoke up, his arms crossed. "Cody's right. You'll need to learn control. I mean, I've been using my powers longer than you, but even I don't know the full extent of what a Kismet can do." Cody turned around, fixing his gaze on Mallory. "You need training too, Mallory." Mallory's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? Me?" Cody nodded, his tone firm. "Yes. You were trained by the hooded man, and that means he knows all your moves. He knows how you think, how you fight. You need to be retrained in the Kismet way, so he won't see you coming." Mallory opened his mouth to protest, but stopped, realizing that Cody had a point. "I guess you're right," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Jade, watching his son in this moment of leadership, couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. He'd always known Cody was strong, but something had changed in him since his time in the parallel universe. There was a confidence, a wisdom that hadn't been there before. Jade thought to himself, how did you get so smart? Cody's eyes met his father's, and he continued, I can handle a little bit of the training. But we're going to need help for the rest. There's someone we need to see. Jade's interest piqued. Who? Yemilith. Cody replied. She's a Kismet, and she knows a lot about both of you. She's been watching for a long time, and she wants to meet you. She can help with your training, teach you things I can't. Mallory's eyes narrowed. Yemilith? I've heard that name before. Isn't she? One of the most powerful Kismets out there. Cody finished. Yes. And she's waiting for us. Jade nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. Then it sounds like we've got a trip to make. Valerie, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I'll work on getting the portal ready. We're going to need it if we're visiting another Kismet. Cody glanced at his sister, a small smile forming. Thanks, Val. As Valerie left the room to start preparations, Jade turned back to his son. I trust you, Cody. If you say this is what we need, then I'm ready. Mallory crossed his arms, his expression softening. Yeah, me too. Let's get this done. Cody nodded, the weight of their mission settling over him. Then let's get ready. We're going to need everything we've got if we're going to face the hooded man. And with Yemilith's help, we might just stand a chance. As the four of them stood together, united in purpose, Jade felt a sense of resolve settle in his chest. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready to face it. Together. Jade and Mallory stood in their rooms, mentally preparing for the journey ahead. There was a quiet understanding between them, this would be no ordinary challenge. The hooded man was a formidable enemy, but with Yemilith's guidance, they hoped to stand a chance. Meanwhile, Cody made his way to the lab, where Valerie was working alongside Claire. Valerie was adjusting the equipment they'd need for their trip, her hands moving with quick precision. Claire stood beside her, handing her tools and offering quiet support. Cody paused in the doorway, watching them for a moment. He admired Valerie's determination, but he knew there was something else she needed to understand, something important about what lay ahead. Val. Cody said as he approached, can we talk? Valerie glanced up, slightly surprised by the serious tone in his voice. Sure. What's up? Cody took a deep breath before speaking. You need to come with us. Valerie frowned. What do you mean? I'm getting the portal ready for you guys. I'll stay back and monitor everything from here. Cody shook his head. That's not going to be enough. You're a Kismet too, Val. If you're going to be out there with us, in the middle of this fight, you need training, just like Dad and Mallory. Valerie blinked, caught off guard. Me? A Kismet? But I've never even. I mean, I don't have powers like you guys. Cody gave her a reassuring look. Maybe not yet, but it's in you, Val. If you're out there on the battlefield with us, we can't have you untrained. You need to understand what you're capable of, and you need to be ready to fight. Valerie hesitated, glancing over at Claire, who had stopped what she was doing to listen. Claire's eyes filled with concern, and she stepped forward, placing a hand on Valerie's shoulder. Cody's right. Claire said softly, though her voice trembled slightly. I'm worried about you going out there, Val. This is dangerous. But if you're going to be with them, you need to be prepared. Valerie's gaze flickered between her mother and brother. She could see the truth in their eyes, even though the thought of being a Kismet was still foreign to her. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Valerie said quietly, uncertainty creeping into her voice. You are. Cody said firmly. I'll help you, and so will Yemilith. But you have to come with us. We can't do this alone. Valerie looked down for a moment, processing everything. Then, with a determined nod, she met Cody's eyes. Okay. I'm in. If this is what I need to do, I'll do it. Claire pulled Valerie into a gentle hug, her voice soft. Just be careful, okay? Valerie nodded against her mother's shoulder. I will, Mom. As the three of them stood there, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them, Cody felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were all in this together. And with Yemilith's guidance, they would be stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The family was united, and now, they were ready to fight. As Cody turned to leave the lab, he paused and looked back at Valerie, his expression thoughtful. Val, you might think you don't have any powers right now, but from what I've heard, you're the most powerful one among us. Valerie raised an eyebrow, caught off guard. What are you talking about? Cody stepped closer, his voice steady. Yemilith can help you unsuppress your powers. Remember when you told me about that being you met? You and Dad were setting the timeline, and it told you that you were special, that you'd do great things? Valerie blinked, the memory rushing back to her. She hadn't thought about it in a long time, but it had always lingered in the back of her mind. Well? Cody continued, this is it, Val. This is what they were talking about. You're more than you realize. And when you unlock that power, you're going to do incredible things. Valerie stared at her brother, speechless. Part of her wanted to deny it, to brush it off, but deep down, she felt a spark of something powerful, something that had always been there, waiting. Cody smiled at her, a warm, confident smile. You've got this. I know you do. With that, he turned and walked out of the lab, leaving Valerie standing there, her thoughts swirling with possibilities she hadn't dared to consider before. Valerie stood there, Cody's words echoing in her mind as she tried to wrap her head around everything. The most powerful one among us? It didn't seem possible. She had always felt like the one supporting everyone else, using her intelligence and determination to help her family. But powers? That was something she had never truly believed she had. She looked at Claire, who was watching her with a mixture of pride and concern. Do you think he's right? Valerie asked quietly. Claire gave her daughter a soft smile, stepping closer and placing a hand on her cheek. I've always known you were special, Val. Even when you were little, there was something about you, something different. Your father and I always believed you were destined for great things. Maybe this is what Cody's been talking about. Valerie exhaled slowly, her mind racing with the memories of that strange being who had spoken to her and her father so long ago. You are special. You will do great things. The words had seemed cryptic at the time, but now, standing on the brink of a battle that would decide the fate of their world, they took on new meaning. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Valerie admitted, her voice shaking slightly. Claire shook her head. No one's ever truly ready, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean you can't rise to the occasion. You've always done that. You've always been strong when we needed you the most. Valerie felt a wave of emotion surge through her, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But underneath it all, there was a spark, a flicker of something powerful. Maybe Cody was right. Maybe this was her time. Okay, Valerie said, her voice growing steadier. If I'm going to do this, I need to be ready. I need to figure out what I can do. Claire nodded, her eyes shining with pride. And you will. You're my daughter. There's nothing you can't do. Valerie gave her mother a small smile, feeling the support and love that had always been a constant in her life. It was what gave her the strength to keep going, to face the unknown. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. I'll be ready, Valerie said, determination settling into her voice. When the time comes, I'll be ready. Later, in the quiet of the night, Jade sat in his study, his mind racing with thoughts of the coming battle. There was so much at stake, more than he had ever imagined. The hooded man was still out there, and now they were heading toward an uncertain future, with Yemilith as their guide. But even more than that, Jade's thoughts kept drifting back to his family. Cody's unexpected return, Valerie's untapped potential, and Mallory's journey to redemption. It was overwhelming. As if sensing his unease, the door to the study creaked open. Valerie stepped inside, her face calm but resolute. Hey, Dad, she said, walking over to him. Jade smiled at her, motioning for her to sit beside him. Hey, Val. Everything all right? Valerie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah. I've been thinking about everything. About what Cody said. Jade's brow furrowed. What about? Valerie looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edges of her sleeves. About being a Kismet. About having these powers I didn't even know I had. Jade listened quietly, knowing there was more she needed to say. I never saw myself as being special like that. But now, I'm starting to wonder if there's more to me than I thought. Valerie continued. That being, the one we met when we fixed the timeline. It said I'd do great things. And now Cody's telling me that I'm the most powerful one among us. It's a lot to take in. Jade nodded slowly, his eyes softening. Val, I've always known you were special. From the moment you were born, your mother and I felt it. You've always had something inside you, something strong, something unique. You've been there for this family in ways that no one else could be. Valerie looked up at her father, her eyes searching his. But what if I can't handle it? What if I'm not strong enough to do what needs to be done? Jade smiled gently. You're already strong, Val. You've proven that time and time again. And now, you'll just have to learn how to channel that strength into something even greater. Yemilith will help you with that. Cody and I will be right there with you. Valerie leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. I guess we don't have a choice, do we? Jade chuckled softly. No, we don't. But if there's anyone I trust to rise to the occasion, it's you. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything they were about to face settling over them. But in that quiet moment, there was also a sense of hope, a feeling that, together, they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. I'll be ready. Valerie repeated, her voice steady. Jade nodded, his heart swelling with pride. I know you will. The next morning, the Wells family gathered in the lab, the portal technology humming softly as they made final preparations for their journey. Cody and Mallory were already packed and ready, while Valerie made adjustments to the systems with Claire at her side. Jade stood by the doorway, watching his family with a quiet sense of determination. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But they were ready. Together, they would face whatever the future held. As the portal flickered to life, casting an ethereal glow across the room, Jade took a deep breath. It was time. Let's do this, he said, stepping forward. Valerie, Cody, Mallory, and Claire joined him, their expressions resolute. And with that, they stepped through the portal, into the unknown. The portal opened with a shimmering hum, and Jade, Valerie, Cody, and Mallory stepped through into a landscape that seemed to pulse with energy. The air was thick with a strange, almost tangible power, and in the distance, a large temple-like structure stood, glowing faintly in the twilight. Yemilith was waiting for them there. Jade took a deep breath, glancing over at his children, then at Mallory. He could sense the tension in his brother. This meeting was crucial. Yemilith was supposed to help them unlock their potential and prepare them for the looming threat of the hooded man, but something about this encounter made Jade feel uneasy. As they approached the temple, Yemilith emerged from the shadows. She was tall and graceful, her eyes a deep, glowing green that seemed to see through everything. Her presence was commanding, but there was also something familiar in the way she looked at Jade and Mallory, something warm and almost maternal. Jade, Mallory, Cody, Valerie, Yemilith greeted them, her voice carrying both wisdom and kindness. I've been expecting you. Cody stepped forward first. Yemilith, we've come for training. We need to be ready for the hooded man. Yemilith nodded, her gaze shifting to Jade and Mallory. Yes, you do. But there is much more you need to understand before we begin. There are truths you have yet to uncover. Jade's brow furrowed. What kind of truths? Yemilith paused, her expression softening as she looked at Jade and Mallory. The truth of who you really are. I didn't bring you here just for training. I brought you here because it's time you learned the truth about your origins. Jade and Mallory exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" Mallory asked, his voice cautious. Yemilith took a step closer, her eyes meeting theirs. "I am your mother." The words hung in the air like a shockwave, hitting both Jade and Mallory hard. Jade blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. "Their mother?" Mallory's jaw clenched. "Our mother? But we were raised by someone else. The woman who took care of us." Yemilith shook her head gently. "That woman was not your real mother. She was assigned to protect you. I had to give you up when you were born because you were in danger." Jade's head spun. "Danger? What kind of danger?" Yemilith hesitated, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. I mated with a time guardian. It was forbidden. The other guardians found out, and it put all of you at risk. I couldn't keep you safe, not with the forces that would have come after you if they knew who you really were." Jade and Mallory stared at her, the enormity of the revelation sinking in. Mallory's face darkened with the weight of it. "So, the woman who raised us wasn't our mother?" Mallory said, his voice trembling with frustration. "Raised you, brother," he added, glancing at Jade bitterly. "I didn't get that. I was taken away." Yemilith's eyes filled with sorrow as she turned to Mallory. "You were taken by the hooded man, raised to serve him. It broke my heart, but I was powerless to stop it." Mallory looked away, his fists clenched at his sides. Jade, feeling his brother's pain, placed a hand on his shoulder, but Mallory shrugged it off. As the tension thickened, Yemilith spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. "There is more, something I did not mean to reveal so soon." Jade's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Yemilith took a deep breath. "Cody and Valerie, they are your children, yes. So that makes them also my grandchildren." Jade's heart skipped a beat, and he stared at Yemilith. Yemilith sighed, her eyes meeting Jade's. "Because their mother, Claire, is also part of the Kismet bloodline. Through her, they inherited more than you realize. That is why Valerie's power is so strong. She is special." Valerie took a step back, the weight of the revelation hitting her hard. "So, I guess that does make me your granddaughter." Yemilith nodded, her face filled with love. "Yes. I didn't tell you sooner because I wanted you to be ready to hear it. I know this is a lot to take in." Jade felt a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, disbelief, but most of all, uncertainty. "Why didn't you tell us any of this before?" "I didn't think the time was right." Yemilith explained, her voice calm. "You needed to grow into your own strength before learning the truth. I have been watching from afar, guiding you all where I could. But now, with the hooded man closing in, it's time you know everything." Mallory suddenly stepped back, his face tight with frustration. I need a moment. I need to think." "Mallory." Jade began, but Mallory raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, Jade," Mallory said, his voice strained. "I need to go for a walk. I'll be fine. I just need to take this all in." Jade watched as Mallory turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows beyond the temple. He could feel the weight of his brother's turmoil, the pain of years of manipulation and lies, but he knew better than to push him right now. Jade turned back to Yemilith, his expression wary. "I don't know what to make of all this. It's a lot to process." Yemilith nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know. I didn't expect you to accept it all at once. But trust me, Jade, I am telling you the truth. I gave you up to protect you. Now, I'm here to help you finish what we started, to stop the hooded man and protect your family." Jade sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I hope you're right. But I'm not sure what to believe anymore." Yemilith stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You don't have to trust everything right away. but know that I've always loved you both. And I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Jade looked at her, unsure of what to say. This was all too much, learning that Yemilith was his mother, that Cody and Valerie were more deeply connected to the Kismets than he'd realized, and now having to trust someone he barely knew. But one thing was clear, they had no choice but to work together. For now, that would have to be enough. As Jade stood there, trying to process everything Yemilith had revealed, Claire walked up, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. She had stayed quiet for most of the conversation, but now she stepped forward, her voice steady but laced with tension. "What do you mean when you said I'm part of the Kismet bloodline?" Claire asked, her eyes locking onto Yemilith. "What does that mean for me?" Yemilith turned to Claire, her face softening with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. "I know this is hard to understand, Claire, but your connection to the Kismet bloodline goes deeper than you may have realized. You are not just a human, your ancestry ties back to the Kismets, though it has remained dormant within you." Claire's eyes widened, and she took a step back. "But I don't have any powers. I've never felt anything like that." Yemilith shook her head gently. "You may not have manifested powers like Jade or the others, but the potential is still there. The Kismet blood runs through your veins. It's part of what made your children so powerful." Jade glanced at Claire, shock rippling through him. He had never suspected this either. Claire, his rock, the person who had grounded him all these years, part of the Kismet legacy? But how is that possible? Claire asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't understand." Yemilith smiled softly, stepping closer. "The Kismet bloodline is ancient, and it is spread throughout many worlds and realities. Sometimes, it lies dormant for generations. In your case, Claire, it has manifested in your children, particularly in Valerie, but it has always been a part of you. You are the link that strengthens the power within your family." Claire stood there, stunned by the revelation. "So, what you're saying is that this bloodline, it's why Cody and Valerie are so strong. Why Valerie is the way she is?" Yemilith nodded. "Yes. It is through you that Valerie's strength has been amplified. And Cody's as well. That's why the hooded man sees your family as a threat. He knows that together, you are powerful, perhaps more powerful than he anticipated." Claire was silent for a moment, trying to take it all in. The weight of this new information pressed down on her, but as always, she stood tall. She had faced countless challenges with her family, and this was no different. "So what now?" Claire asked, her voice calm but firm. "What does this mean for me? Do I need to unlock something, too?" Yemilith shook her head gently. "No, Claire. Your strength lies not in the manifestation of powers, but in who you are. You are the heart of this family, and that is where your true power comes from. Without you, they would not be as strong as they are." Jade reached for Claire's hand, squeezing it gently. He knew she had always been the glue that held them together, but hearing it from Yemilith, it felt even more profound. Claire looked at Yemilith, her eyes steady. "I don't have powers like them, but I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family. I've always been part of this fight, and I'm not stepping back now." Yemilith nodded, a look of respect in her eyes. "You are more powerful than you know, Claire. Your role in this is just as important as anyone else's." With that, Claire stood by Jade's side, her resolve as strong as ever. She didn't need powers to be a part of this fight, she had always been a Kismet, and her strength was in her unwavering love and dedication to her family. Together, they were stronger than ever. Mallory came walking back into the clearing, his steps measured and his face thoughtful. There was no anger or frustration in his expression, but a deep need for understanding, for clarity. He stopped a few feet from Yemilith, his gaze intense yet calm. "Yemilith," Mallory began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of everything he had just learned. "I need you to explain more. About everything. I'm I'm trying to accept all this, but it's a lot to take in. Yemilith nodded, understanding the inner turmoil her son was feeling. She stepped forward, her expression soft. I know, Mallory. And I'm sorry that I kept the truth from you for so long. I had hoped to reveal it when you were ready. Mallory held up a hand. I'm not angry. I'm not even sure how I'm supposed to feel. But I've spent my whole life thinking one thing, and now I find out the person who raised me wasn't my real mother. That I was taken from you, manipulated by the hooded man. And now, I find out that you're my real mother. He paused, glancing at Jade. It's just a lot. Jade, who had been watching quietly, gave Mallory a small nod of support. He understood how overwhelming it all was, he felt the same way. But he also knew Mallory was strong enough to handle it. Mallory took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Yemilith's. I'm not mad at you. I just need to understand why. Why did you give us up? Why did you let all of this happen? Yemilith looked at him, her expression pained. I had no choice, Mallory. When you and Jade were born, I knew you would be in danger because of who I was, because of who your father was. I mated with a time guardian, something that was forbidden by the laws of both our kinds. The moment the other guardians found out, they would have hunted us down. I couldn't risk it. Mallory crossed his arms, listening but still skeptical. So, you gave us up to protect us? Yes. Yemilith replied, her voice soft. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I knew I wouldn't be able to keep you safe, so I entrusted you to others. But then, the hooded man took you, Mallory. He twisted you into someone I hardly recognized. Mallory looked down for a moment, his thoughts churning. He had spent so much of his life under the hooded man's control, believing in lies and false promises. But Jade had shown him a different path, a better one. I've changed. Mallory said quietly. I'm not who the hooded man wanted me to be anymore. Yemilith smiled, her eyes softening with pride. I know. You've come so far, Mallory. You and Jade both. And that's why I'm here now, to help you reach your full potential, to stop the hooded man once and for all. Mallory nodded, but there was still a trace of doubt in his eyes. I want to believe this. I want to trust you, but... Jade stepped forward, placing a hand on Mallory's shoulder. We'll figure this out together, Mallory. You're not alone in this. Mallory glanced at his brother, a small smile tugging at his lips. You know, Jade, I've always wanted a brother like you. Even when we were separated, even when I was on the wrong path, I always knew there was something missing. It was you. Jade felt a wave of emotion hit him, but he kept his voice steady. You've always been my brother, Mallory. No matter what. Mallory looked at Yemilith again, his expression softer now. All right. I'm not mad at you. I love my family, and that includes you. But you need to understand that this is going to take time. I'll come around. I just need to process it all. Yemilith nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. Take all the time you need, Mallory. I'm not asking you to accept everything right away. But know that I'm here, and I always have been. Mallory took a deep breath and nodded. Okay. I can live with that. There was a moment of silence, a quiet acceptance settling over the group. Jade felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in a long while, it felt like they were all on the same page, working together as a family. Mallory turned to Jade with a smirk. So, what's next, brother? You think you can keep up with me in this Kismet training? Jade laughed, shaking his head. I guess we're about to find out. Yemilith smiled at them both, a love in her expression. As they stood together, united despite the weight of their past and the uncertainties of the future, Jade knew that they had taken an important step forward. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family, stronger than ever. As the conversation settled and the tension eased, Cody, who had been listening quietly from the sidelines, stepped forward. He had something on his mind that he needed to clarify, especially after all the revelations that had just unfolded. Yemilith. Cody began, his voice careful. There's something I've been wondering about. In the parallel universe where I was stuck, I spent a lot of time with the other version of my dad, the other Jade. He trained me, taught me a lot about Kismet powers. But now that I know the truth about my father's origins, I can't help but wonder, did that version of Jade also have you as his mother? Yemilith turned to Cody, her glowing green eyes softening as she considered the question. There was a pause, a flicker of thought in her expression as if she were weighing her words carefully. The parallel universes are complex. Yemilith began, her voice thoughtful. Each one contains a different version of the people you know, but they do not always follow the same exact paths. In some cases, they are shaped by different circumstances. Some Jades in parallel universes were raised in different ways or had different influences. But the bond of blood is strong across the multiverse. Cody raised an eyebrow. So, are you saying that you are his mother? The other Jade? Yemilith smiled softly. In many universes, yes. I am the mother of multiple versions of Jade and Mallory. But not in all. The universe you were in may have had a different outcome, one where I did not have to give him up, or where other forces shaped his destiny. Cody nodded slowly, processing the information. So, the Jade who trained me, he might have been raised differently, or by someone else. It is possible. Yemilith replied. Parallel versions of a person can have wildly different lives, even though they share the same soul, the same essence. The Jade in your universe may have had a different path that led him to become the mentor you needed. But whether I was his mother or not in that universe, the strength you saw in him is a reflection of the same potential your father has in this universe. Cody's brow furrowed as he absorbed this. I guess it makes sense. The other Jade, he seemed different. Stronger in some ways, but also harder, maybe. He'd been through a lot. Yemilith nodded. That is the nature of parallel worlds. The experiences one version of a person faces can drastically alter their character, for better or worse. But the bond between you and that Jade was real, just as the bond with your true father is. Both are part of you now. Cody glanced over at his father, who was watching the exchange with quiet curiosity. Thanks, Yemilith. I needed to understand. Yemilith placed a gentle hand on Cody's shoulder. You carry the wisdom of both Jades with you now, Cody. That is a rare gift. It will serve you well in the battles ahead. Cody smiled, feeling a sense of closure. He now understood that the love and guidance he had received from the Jade in the parallel universe didn't diminish his connection to his real father. In fact, it only strengthened his resolve to fight for the family he had now. As Yemilith stepped back, Cody glanced at his father once more. Jade gave him a small, knowing nod, acknowledging the unspoken understanding that passed between them. They were ready to face whatever came next, together as a family. Yemilith smiled, warmth in her expression. We begin the training now. There is much to learn, and time is not on our side. But together, we will be ready. Yemilith stepped forward, her eyes glowing with the energy of the Kismet abilities she was about to reveal. Jade, Mallory, Valerie, and Cody stood in a loose circle around her, their expressions attentive and curious. They were ready to learn, and Yemilith was prepared to guide them through their first steps toward mastering their powers. Now that you know the truth about who you are, Yemilith began, her voice calm but powerful, it's time to unlock the potential within you. As Kismets, you have abilities far beyond those of ordinary beings, abilities rooted in the manipulation of time itself. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The training you're about to undergo will push you, but it is necessary if you're going to face the hooded man and his forces. Each of you possesses these powers to varying degrees, and I will teach you how to wield them. Yemilith raised her hand, and a shimmering blade of light appeared, floating just above her palm. First, temporal blades. These are energy weapons formed from the very fabric of time. They can cut through physical objects, but more importantly, they can manipulate time on the things they touch, either aging or reverting them. In battle, this allows you to change the outcome of a strike entirely. Jade and Mallory exchanged glances, clearly intrigued. Cody leaned forward, fascinated by the idea of wielding time as a weapon. Yemilith continued, next, chrono-shielding. You will be able to generate shields that slow down incoming attacks, giving you more time to react. And if necessary, you can rewind the moment of impact to undo damage taken. This power can save you in a critical moment. She then moved her hand in a flowing gesture, and her form shimmered briefly, fading in and out of sight before reappearing in a different spot. This is phase shifting. It allows you to phase out of sync with the current timeline, making you intangible for a short period. You can move through solid objects or avoid attacks entirely. It also allows you to reappear in a different position, making you unpredictable in battle. Valerie's eyes lit up at the demonstration, clearly eager to try it for herself. Time-infused strikes. Yemilith said next, her voice strong. Your attacks can be enhanced with time energy. A punch, kick, or weapon strike can be multiplied, landing multiple blows in a single moment. You can distort the flow of time for your enemies, causing them to experience your strikes at accelerated or slowed speeds. Mallory smirked at that. Sounds like a fun advantage. Yemilith smiled back, then moved on. Temporal clones are another ability you can use. You'll be able to pull versions of yourself from alternate timelines, creating duplicates that fight alongside you. However, they can only remain for short periods before returning to their own timelines. Use them wisely. Jade nodded, impressed by the range of abilities at their disposal. Yemilith's face grew more serious as she demonstrated the next power. Chrono displacement allows you to move an opponent slightly forward or backward in time. It can confuse and disorient them, making them miss their attacks or even trapping them in a time loop, reliving the same few seconds repeatedly until they break free. She waved her hand, causing a small burst of chaotic energy in the air. Time eruption allows you to disrupt the flow of time in a localized area, freezing, fast-forwarding, or reversing time for anyone caught in the blast. It's a powerful, but volatile, technique. Jade watched carefully, his mind racing with the implications of using these powers in combat. Yemilith smiled slightly as she described the next ability. Moment Mastery. You'll enter a hyper-focused state where you can control each passing moment in combat. This will allow you to predict an enemy's movements and manipulate your actions with precision. You will appear faster than anyone else on the battlefield. She moved gracefully, explaining another power. With Chronosiphon, you'll be able to drain time energy from your opponents, slowing them down while empowering yourself. This will make them sluggish and weak, while you become faster and stronger. Finally, she demonstrated the last power by compressing the air in front of her, distorting it visibly. Time compression allows you to compress or expand time around an object or enemy. They will experience intense pressure, as if time itself is crushing them. This is one of the more advanced abilities, but with practice, you will master it. Jade, Mallory, and Cody listened intently, the magnitude of their powers starting to sink in. But Yemilith turned her gaze to Valerie and stepped closer. Valerie. Yemilith said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and respect. Your abilities go beyond what I've just described. You are different. Your power is far greater than what I can fully explain. The being who told you that you were special, that you would do great things, they were right. Your connection to time is deeper than any of ours. You have the potential to shape time itself in ways that even I cannot. Valerie looked at Yemilith, a mix of excitement and apprehension in her eyes. What does that mean? What can I do? Yemilith smiled gently. We will explore that together. But know this, Valerie, you are destined to lead. Your power, once unlocked, will be the key to ending the hooded man's threat. You can bend time, heal it, and break it. But the depth of your abilities must be carefully nurtured. The weight of Yemilith's words hung in the air, and Valerie stood tall, absorbing the gravity of her potential. Jade glanced at his daughter, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride and protection. We'll be there for you, Val. No matter what happens. Valerie nodded, determination setting in her features. I'll be ready. Yemilith stepped back, her face serene yet strong. Then let us begin. The hooded man's influence grows, but together, we will be ready to face him. With that, their training began in earnest, the Wells family stepping into a new chapter of their journey, ready to wield the power of time against the threats ahead. The training commenced as Yemilith stepped into the center of the circle, her glowing eyes flickering with immense power. We'll start with the basics and work our way up, she said, her voice resolute. You must learn to control these abilities before you use them in battle. Jade, Mallory, Cody, and Valerie each focused, ready to take their first steps toward mastering their Kismet powers. Jade. Yemilith called. You'll go first. Focus on forming a temporal blade. Feel the flow of time around you and mold it into a weapon. Jade closed his eyes, centering himself as he reached out into the invisible current of time. At first, he felt nothing, but then a pulse, small, almost imperceptible, caught his attention. Slowly, a thin line of shimmering energy began to form in his hand. It flickered, growing in size until a blade of pure time energy rested in his grip. The weapon hummed, vibrating as if alive. Opening his eyes, Jade looked at the sword in awe. This is incredible. Yemilith nodded, satisfied. Good. Now, strike that stone pillar. She gestured toward a large, weathered stone in the corner of the training ground. Jade swung the blade, and as it made contact, the stone crumbled, aged rapidly into dust before their eyes. Mallory let out a low whistle. Nice. Yemilith turned to Mallory next. Your turn. Mallory grinned and held out his hand. He didn't close his eyes, instead focusing intently on the energy around him. A blade similar to Jade's formed, but his was darker, with swirling streaks of purple coursing through it, a reflection of his more turbulent connection to time. Without needing instruction, Mallory slashed at a nearby tree. The blade cut clean through, but instead of falling, the tree stood still, until Mallory flicked his wrist, and the entire tree aged centuries in an instant, turning to rot. Yemilith nodded approvingly. You both have an excellent grasp on the temporal blades. In time, you'll be able to use them to alter not just the objects around you but the course of battles themselves. She then turned to Cody. Let's try chrono-shielding next. I'll throw an attack at you, and you'll summon a shield to slow it down. Ready? Cody raised his arms, and Yemilith sent a fast-moving bolt of energy hurtling toward him. His reaction was almost instinctive. A translucent shield of swirling energy appeared in front of him, and the bolt of energy slowed as it hit, coming to a near stop before fizzling out. Great. Yemilith said. With more practice, you'll be able to rewind the damage entirely, even undo wounds or destruction. Cody beamed, clearly proud of himself. Valerie watched closely, eager for her turn, but Yemilith gestured toward her to wait a moment longer. Phase shifting is next. Mallory, try this. Focus on slipping out of sync with the timeline. Mallory furrowed his brow and focused. His body shimmered, flickering out of existence for a moment before reappearing several feet away, out of breath but grinning. That was weird. Mallory said, catching his breath. You'll get used to it. Yemilith replied. And with practice, you'll be able to shift in and out of phase effortlessly during combat, avoiding attacks and moving through barriers. Yemilith then finally turned to Valerie. You're ready now. Try phase shifting. Valerie focused, following the same instructions, and disappeared almost instantly, reappearing across the field with a speed that shocked everyone. "You're already attuned to your abilities," Yemilith said, clearly impressed. "Now, let's see how far you can push them." Valerie grinned, clearly relishing the challenge. She stepped forward, ready to begin her journey toward unlocking the deeper potential Yemilith had hinted at earlier. Jade, watching his daughter, couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and anxiety. He knew Valerie was special, and as Yemilith had said, her powers were far greater than they could comprehend. But the risks were also immense, and Jade silently vowed to protect her, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Their training continued, with Yemilith pushing each of them harder, teaching them to combine their time-based abilities with their natural instincts in combat. Jade's temporal blades grew sharper and more refined, Mallory's phase shifting became second nature, and Cody quickly mastered chrono-shielding. But Valerie was the one who stood out. Her ability to phase shift was flawless, and as Yemilith introduced more complex techniques, like temporal clones and chronosiphon, Valerie showed an innate understanding of how to use time to her advantage. She summoned clones of herself from alternate timelines and even drained time energy from Yemilith during a sparring session, slowing her movements while empowering herself. By the end of the session, Yemilith smiled proudly at them all. "You've all done well today, but this is just the beginning. The hooded man won't hold back, and neither can you. Your powers are strong, but they need to be sharpened like any weapon. The time will come when you must face him, and when that moment arrives, you will be ready." Jade, Mallory, Valerie, and Cody all exchanged glances, feeling a shared sense of determination. Together, they would master their powers and face whatever lay ahead, because they were Kismets, and their destiny was just beginning. After weeks of grueling training, the Wells family stood in the open fields of the Kismet training grounds. The air around them crackled with energy as Yemilith observed them with a satisfied smile. "You've all completed your training," Yemilith said, her eyes glowing with pride. "You are ready. The hooded man won't expect this level of mastery from any of you. Use your powers wisely and remember, you are stronger together." Jade, Mallory, Cody, and Valerie stood tall, their expressions a mixture of determination and anticipation. They had pushed themselves to their limits, discovering not only the depths of their abilities but also the strength they drew from each other. Yemilith stepped forward and gently touched Jade's shoulder. "I know this journey has been difficult, but you're prepared for what's coming. Trust in yourselves, and trust in your family." Jade nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him. He had grown stronger in every way, both as a Kismet and as a father. "We won't let you down." With a final look at Yemilith, they turned toward the portal that would take them back home. The familiar glow of temporal energy surrounded them as they stepped through, leaving the Kismet training grounds behind. Back home. The transition from the ethereal training world to their home felt jarring at first. Jade stepped out of the portal and into the living room of their house, feeling an odd sense of calm. It was almost surreal to return to such a normal setting after the intense weeks of training. Mallory stretched his arms, pacing the room as if trying to adjust to the more ordinary space. "Feels weird to be back. Almost like none of it happened." "It happened," Valerie said, her voice steady. She stood by the window, gazing outside, her fingers lightly tapping the glass. "We're different now. Stronger." Cody, sitting on the couch, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but we can't forget what's coming next. The hooded man won't hold back, especially not after everything we've learned." Jade walked over to the fireplace, his mind replaying the lessons from Yemilith. He looked at his family, feeling both proud and anxious. "We've trained hard, but now we need to prepare ourselves mentally for the final fight. The hooded man has manipulated time for years. He's dangerous, and he'll do anything to win." Valerie turned from the window, her eyes full of determination. "We won't let him. Yemilith said I'm key to ending this, but I won't do it alone. We're all going to fight together." Mallory, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, spoke up. He won't see us coming. We're not the same people he manipulated before. We have the power of time now, and we're going to use it to stop him." A heavy silence fell over the room as they each reflected on their individual journeys. Jade felt the familiar sense of responsibility settle over him, but now it was shared. His family, his twin brother, his children, they all stood beside him, ready to face the hooded man. He thought back to the beginning, to the moment Valerie had pulled him from that portal, rescuing him from the future. So much had changed since then. "Let's take tonight to rest," Jade said finally. "We've come far, and tomorrow we face the hooded man. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The family nodded in agreement, but each of them was lost in their own thoughts. Later that evening, Jade found himself sitting alone in the quiet of the night, the weight of the impending battle pressing on him. Claire, his wife, entered the room quietly, her eyes filled with concern. "You're thinking about tomorrow?" Jade nodded, unable to hide his worry. "It's all led up to this, Claire. The training, everything we've learned, this is it. We're going up against the hooded man, and I don't know what's going to happen." Claire sat down beside him, her hand resting gently on his. "You've faced impossible odds before, Jade. You'll do it again. And you're not alone. You have Mallory, Valerie, Cody, and me." Jade turned to look at her, the fear in his chest loosening slightly. "I just don't want to lose anyone. We've fought so hard to get here. I don't know if I could bear it if—" "Stop," Claire said softly, her voice firm but comforting. "You can't think like that. You've trained, you've prepared. And I know you'll do everything to protect our family. But you need to believe in them. Believe in yourself." Jade nodded, his chest filling with a renewed sense of purpose. He kissed Claire's forehead. "You're right. We'll face him together, and we'll stop him." The final preparation. The next morning, the house was alive with activity. Cody and Mallory checked their equipment, making sure everything was in place for the fight ahead. Valerie sat quietly at the dining table, eyes closed, focusing on her inner power. Jade gathered them together, standing at the center of the room. "This is it. The hooded man has controlled our lives for too long. Today, we take that control back. We've trained for this. We've become more than we ever thought possible. Whatever happens, we do this together." Mallory smirked, his confidence palpable. "He doesn't stand a chance." Cody nodded, his eyes steely. "We're ready." Valerie opened her eyes, her expression calm but determined. "He's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Jade smiled at his family, feeling the strength radiating from them. "Then let's finish this." With a final nod, they gathered around the portal Yemilith had left for them. The familiar glow enveloped them, and with one last breath, they stepped through, heading toward the final battle. The hooded man awaited them, but this time, the Wells family was ready. Time itself would be their greatest weapon,